Nobody in the Hall of Concord expected the human ambassador to die on live transmission. The chamber had survived civil wars, assassinations, even terrorist sieges over its 800-year history, but never once had a diplomat been executed openly beneath the neutral banners of the Galactic Assembly. The station itself floated in the dead center of civilized space, a city-sized ring of silver towers and artificial oceans where empires settled disputes before entire star systems burned. Weapons were forbidden there. Violence was forbidden there. Every species in the known galaxy trusted the Hall, because they believed no one would dare violate its laws. Then Ambassador Elias Ward collapsed in front of 600 delegates while the cameras were still rolling. At first, many thought it was a medical emergency. The human had been speaking only seconds earlier, calm and composed beneath the pale lights of the council chamber, arguing for a ceasefire between the Varkan Dominion and the outer colonies they had begun glassing from orbit. His voice had remained steady even while Varkan warlords mocked him openly. Humanity had earned a reputation for patience over the centuries. Humans negotiated. Humans traded. Humans mediated conflicts between stronger races. They were respected, but never feared. Then blood spilled from Elias Ward's mouth onto the white council floor. The silence that followed felt unnatural, as if the station itself had forgotten how to breathe. Council medics rushed toward him while hundreds of delegates rose in confusion, but the Varkan commander seated across from Ward never moved. Supreme Marshal Kaler simply watched the dying human, with cold amusement glowing in his reptilian eyes. 12 feet tall and wrapped in black ceremonial armor, he looked less like a statesman and more like an executioner who had wandered into diplomacy by mistake. Perhaps, Kaler said into the silence, humans are weaker than their speeches suggest. Some delegates recoiled at the cruelty in his voice. Others looked away entirely. Nobody challenged him. That was the moment Commander Lyra Vale realized the killing had been planned from the beginning. She stood behind the human delegation platform, frozen as medics fought desperately to stabilize Elias Ward on the chamber floor. Her mind refused to accept what her eyes were seeing. Elias had trained her personally. He had taught her how to negotiate with species that respected intimidation more than morality. He had once told her that the purpose of diplomacy was not to trust monsters, but to delay them long enough for wiser minds to prevail. Now he was dying beneath the flags he had spent 30 years defending. Then Elias's eyes found hers across the chaos. Not afraid, not angry, warning her. With trembling hands, he pressed bloodied fingers against the small black band around his wrist. A pulse of blue light flashed once, only once. Lyra's stomach turned to ice, because she recognized the signal. Across the chamber, hidden behind human diplomatic insignias and quiet civilian clothing, every member of the human delegation suddenly went still at exactly the same time. No panic, no confusion, no shouting. It was as if they had all heard the same invisible command. Then, one by one, they began walking toward the exits. The delegates from other species shouted questions as humans calmly abandoned the chamber. Some demanded answers. Some threatened arrests. None of the humans responded. Their faces carried something far worse than fear. Recognition. As if this exact moment had always been expected. Lyra remained kneeling beside Elias as alarms finally began echoing through the hall. His breathing was fading rapidly now. The poison moving through his bloodstream was unlike anything in the medical archives. Even the station AI could not identify it. Elias gripped her sleeve weakly and pulled her closer. "They finally lit the lantern," he whispered. Then he died. 3 minutes later, every human vessel in assembly space vanished from galactic networks simultaneously. 5 minutes later, automated trade systems across 2,000 worlds began shutting down. 9 minutes later, long-range military observatories detected something impossible emerging from the unmapped dark between stars. And deep beneath the surface of Luna, inside a chamber that officially did not exist, ancient machines humanity had hidden for centuries awakened for the first time. By the end of the first hour, the galaxy lost 17% of its trade capacity. Nobody understood how that was possible. Across the assembly central networks, shipping lanes began collapsing into chaos as navigation grids failed one after another. Cargo convoys drifted helplessly through hyperspace corridors while human route coordinators correcting microdeviations. Orbital elevators stalled above industrial worlds because their balancing algorithms had quietly been maintained by human engineering guilds for over a century. Emergency medical stations from the core systems to the frontier colonies suddenly discovered that the predictive diagnostic AIs they depended on could no longer access critical calibration layers hidden deep inside their operating architecture. Human access codes had vanished, not deleted, withdrawn. Entire worlds realized, with growing horror, that humanity had woven itself so deeply into galactic infrastructure that removing them felt less like losing an ally and more like having invisible organs ripped out of civilization itself. Inside the Hall of Concord, panic spread faster than any virus. Delegates screamed across emergency channels, while assembly officials attempted to regain control of collapsing communications grids. Supreme Marshal Kaler dismissed most of it as overreaction. The Varkan warlord sat unmoved in the same chamber where Elias Ward's blood still stained the floor, listening to report of economic instability with visible boredom. "They are merchants," he growled. "Let them sulk. They will crawl back once hunger reminds them who controls the stars." But even as he spoke, another report arrived. Then another, then 6 more. Human colonies were sealing themselves, not evacuating, not mobilizing publicly. Sealing. Massive defense barriers appeared around systems long believed to be civilian territories. Mining worlds suddenly revealed planetary shield arrays powerful enough to survive fleet bombardments. Remote listening stations hidden in asteroid belts began broadcasting encrypted military traffic across frequencies no alien empire recognized. On the edge of assembly space, a patrol fleet attempting to approach the human colony world of Kepri detected over 4,000 autonomous defense platforms awakening beneath the planet's oceans. 4,000. The patrol commander turned his ships around immediately. Commander Lyra Vale watched all of it unfold from a secured observation room beneath the hall, while assembly investigators demanded answers she could not give. Officially, she was still under diplomatic protection. Unofficially, armed guards stood outside every door. The galaxy no longer trusted humanity, which meant the Lantern Protocol was already working. That realization terrified her more than Elias's death. She replayed his final words endlessly in her mind, while assembly analysts argued behind glass walls nearby. They believed humanity was preparing for retaliation. Some feared war. Others feared economic collapse. None of them understood what the phrase truly meant. They finally lit the lantern. Not started, not activated. Lit as if the protocol had always existed, waiting silently in darkness for this exact moment. A sharp chime interrupted her thoughts. One of the analysts had frozen mid-sentence while staring at a projection screen. Slowly, the room around him fell silent. Lyra rose from her chair instinctively as the display zoomed toward a grainy transmission intercepted near the edge of map space. At first it looked like static. Then shapes emerged from the distortion. Ships, hundreds of them. No transponder signatures. No registry markers. No visible engine trails. The vessels moved in absolute silence through a region known as the Black Reach, a dead zone so unstable that hyperspace travel there was considered impossible. Yet the objects crossing it dwarfed anything the assembly had ever built. Their hulls were dark enough to vanish against starlight itself, visible only when distant suns reflected faintly across their surfaces. An assembly officer swallowed hard. Those can't be human. But Lyra already knew they were. The shape of the lead vessel confirmed it. Human, ancient, and very, very real. Elsewhere across the galaxy, the consequences of humanity's disappearance deepened by the hour. On the industrial world of Miros Prime, fusion reactors began overheating because the human maintenance crews who operated cooling synchronization had vanished overnight. Entire agricultural regions on frontier colonies lost atmospheric stabilizers after discovering humans had designed fail-safes nobody else knew how to repair. Financial markets spiraled into freefall as hidden human economic networks silently disconnected from interstellar exchanges. Humanity had never ruled the galaxy politically. Now everyone realized they had been holding it together structurally. The fear that followed was different from ordinary fear. Not fear of invasion, fear of dependency. For centuries, humans had presented themselves as cooperative mediators eager to help stronger civilizations thrive. Nobody had noticed how much power quietly accumulated behind that helpfulness. Nobody had asked why humans always volunteered for logistical operations, engineering systems, communications architecture, or deep space maintenance. And nobody had wondered why humanity never seemed interested in territorial conquest. Until now, in a secure military chamber aboard the Varkan flagship Dominion's Wrath, Supreme Marshal Killer finally began paying attention. A tactical officer knelt before him with visible unease, scales trembling under the bridge lights. "Marshal, we lost contact with Outpost 17. Kaler barely looked up. "Pirates?" "No, sir." The officer hesitated. There was no attack warning. That caught Kaler's attention. The Varkan outposts were fortress installations armed heavily enough to repel entire raids. Nothing simply erased them. "Explain." The officer activated a holographic display. The room darkened. An image appeared. Outpost 17 still floated intact above the moon it guarded. Its hull showed no signs of bombardment. No debris field surrounded it. No emergency beacons transmitted distress signals. But every light aboard the station was dead. Life support offline. Weapons offline. Communications offline. 3,000 Varkan soldiers had vanished without a single shot fired. Then the image zoomed closer. Across the station's outer hull, burned directly into the metal in perfect assembly standard, were 7 words. "The Lantern is watching the dark again." For the first time in many years, Supreme Marshal Kaler felt something cold move beneath his armor. And somewhere far beyond civilized space, hidden inside the black between stars, enormous human fleets continued moving silently toward the heart of the galaxy. 3 days after Elias Ward's murder, the galaxy stopped asking whether humanity was preparing for war. The real question became far worse. How long had humans been preparing? Across assembly territory, encrypted archives began appearing without warning inside government databases, military intelligence corps, and classified diplomatic vaults. Entire security systems that had survived centuries of cyber warfare simply opened themselves from the inside. No firewalls failed. No alarms triggered. Human access signatures appeared briefly across protected networks, then vanished again like ghosts walking through locked walls. What the files contained shook the galaxy harder than the disappearing outposts. The Varkan Dominion's atrocities had not merely been recorded, they had been cataloged. Every slave transport, every civilian purge, every biological experiment conducted on conquered species. Human intelligence had gathered evidence for centuries with terrifying precision. There were battlefield recordings from hidden probes, testimony from survivors no one knew existed, even military communications stolen directly from Varkan command networks. Humanity had been watching everything. The realization spread like poison through the assembly, not because the Varkan crime surprised anyone. Most powerful species committed horrors behind closed borders. The galaxy had long ago learned to tolerate brutality from strong empires as the unavoidable price of stability. No, the terror came from understanding the scale of human patience. For 300 years, humanity had smiled politely while documenting every monster in civilized space. And nobody had noticed. Inside the Assembly's emergency war chamber, delegates shouted over one another, while star maps flashed crimson with new crisis reports. Another Varkan shipyard had gone dark near the border sectors. 2 weapons depots vanished within the same hour. A military convoy carrying plasma warheads disappeared entirely after entering hyperspace, leaving behind only drifting escape pods filled with unconscious survivors. Always survivors. That detail haunted everyone. The attacks were impossibly precise. Human strike forces destroyed engines without rupturing civilian compartments. They targeted military officers while leaving conscripted labor crews alive. Entire defense stations were disabled surgically, as though the attackers knew the internal schematics better than the Varkan engineers who built them. No species fought wars like this. Most civilizations overwhelmed enemies through brute force. Fleets bombarded cities. Armies scorched continents. Conquest was simple mathematics. Apply enough destruction and resistance collapsed. But humanity moved through the Dominion like a scalpel sliding between ribs. Invisible, efficient, merciless only toward those they chose. Commander Lyra Vale stood near the rear of the chamber under armed guard while the delegates argued. Her diplomatic status still protected her technically, though the atmosphere around her had changed completely. The fear in the room was no longer directed at the Varkin. It was directed at humanity. A trembling delegate from Serene Combine finally voiced a thought infecting everyone's mind. If humans possess this capability, she whispered, why pretend weakness for so long? Silence followed. No one answered because no one truly wanted the answer. Then the chamber lights dimmed unexpectedly. A transmission had forced its way directly onto the central assembly display. The room erupted instantly. Security officers shouted while military systems scrambled to trace the intrusion. But Lyra recognized the encryption pattern immediately. Human command architecture. Old architecture. So classified she had only seen fragments of it during deep diplomatic training. The screen flickered once before revealing a single figure seated in darkness. An elderly woman, gray-haired, calm, terrifyingly composed. No identification appeared beneath her image, yet the effect on Lyra was immediate. Every instinct she possessed screamed the same truth. This woman held authority over the Lantern Protocol. I am Admiral Naomi Sarek, the figure said quietly. Her voice was soft enough that the chamber instinctively leaned closer to hear. For 3 centuries, humanity participated in galactic civilization under the assumption that cooperation was preferable to domination. We accepted limited influence. We accepted disrespect. We accepted vulnerability. We did so because power without restraint destroys civilization from within. Behind her, faint stars drifted beyond a massive observation window. Not stars. Ships. Hundreds of dark silhouettes floating silently in formation. The assembly chamber fell deathly still. Ambassador Elias Ward represented the last generation of humans who still believed this galaxy could evolve peacefully on its own. Sarek continued. His murder confirmed our oldest fear. The image shifted suddenly. New footage appeared. Ancient footage. Alien battlefields burned across the screen beneath skies no delegate recognized. Massive war machines moved through ruined cities, while primitive human vessels fought impossible odds against creatures unlike any known species. Entire moons exploded in distant orbits. Human soldiers in obsolete armor marched through ash-covered worlds carrying flags stained black with smoke. The footage ended abruptly. Before humanity joined the assembly, Sarek said, we survived extinction wars inside our own region of space. We learned a lesson the galaxy has not. Her eyes hardened. Predators mistake restraint for weakness. The transmission cut before anyone could respond. For several seconds, nobody in the chamber moved. Then panic detonated. Delegates demanded explanations. Military commanders screamed for fleet mobilizations. Several species immediately began withdrawing from assembly space entirely. Others attempted emergency negotiations with humanity, only to receive automated silence in return. But the greatest damage had already been done. Humanity's image was shattered forever. Not peaceful traders. Not harmless diplomats. A civilization of survivors who had deliberately disguised themselves for centuries while studying everyone around them. And somewhere deep inside Varkin territory, Supreme Marshal Kaler finally encountered the first human soldier face-to-face. It happened aboard the fortress station Karos 9 after another silent assault crippled the installation. Kaler arrived personally with elite guards expecting to confront pirates or insurgents. Instead, he found precision. Military corridors sealed surgically. Weapon systems dismantled without collateral damage. Command officers missing. Civilian workers unharmed. The deeper Kaler pushed into the station, the more unsettling the silence became. Then they discovered the message burned into the command deck wall. You were warned about the dark. Before anyone could react, the lights died. Total blackout consumed the fortress. Heavy breathing echoed through Kaler's helmet speakers, while his guards activated weapons nervously. Motion trackers flickered wildly with impossible readings. Something moved through the darkness faster than Varkin sensors could process. Then one of the guards vanished mid-scream. Not killed. Taken. Another disappeared seconds later. No gunfire. No visible attacker. Only silence swallowing soldiers one by one. Kaler roared orders into darkness, rage overpowering fear. But deep inside himself something colder had begun spreading. Not doubt, recognition. Because for the first time in his life, the great conqueror of the Varkan Dominion understood exactly how prey animals felt. The first Varkan fleet died without ever seeing its enemy. 32 warships entered the Narek corridor, expecting to intercept human raiders fleeing toward the outer systems. The corridor was narrow, unstable, and bordered by collapsed stars whose gravitational distortions made large-scale combat nearly impossible. It was the perfect place for an ambush, which was exactly why the Varkan believed humans would avoid it. Instead, the entire fleet vanished from military tracking 3 minutes after entering the corridor. No distress calls. No battle recordings. Nothing. Then the wreckage began emerging from hyperspace one ship at a time. Not destroyed. Opened. Each vessel drifted lifeless into nearby systems with entire sections surgically carved away as though something had peeled through military armor like paper. Engines remained intact. Weapon systems remained operational. Escape craft were untouched. Only the command centers were gone. The message was unmistakable. Humanity did not need to annihilate fleets to cripple empires. They only needed to remove the people giving orders. Panic spread through the Varkan Dominion faster than censorship could contain it. Military governors abandoned frontier worlds. Supply convoys refused deployment into contested regions. Entire occupation forces mutinied after discovering humans were broadcasting liberation frequencies directly into slave camps across conquered systems. And still no one had actually seen the main human fleet. That uncertainty poisoned everything. Inside the hidden military chambers beneath Luna, Commander Lyra Vale stood before the largest strategic projection she had ever witnessed. Thousands of stars floated across the darkened room, while red indicators marked collapsing Varkan territories in real time. Human operations moved with terrifying synchronization. Fleets emerged from impossible vectors. Sabotage teams struck military infrastructure seconds before orbital assaults began. Entire enemy defense grids shut down moments before attacks landed. It looked less like war and more like a civilization dissecting another one alive. Yet what unsettled Lyra most was not the efficiency. It was the restraint. Human casualty projections were impossibly low. Civilian death tolls across enemy systems remained near zero, despite the scale of operations unfolding. The Lantern Protocol did not wage war through rage. It waged war through control. That should have comforted her. Instead, it frightened her even more, because she had started seeing what Elias Ward must have feared long before his death. Humanity was very, very good at this. Admiral Naomi Sarek stood near the edge of the projection chamber, with several senior commanders gathered around her. Most were veterans of conflicts the galaxy never knew humanity fought. Their uniforms carried no insignias recognizable to the Assembly. No medals. No national markings. Just black fabric and silver bands etched with names of dead worlds. Outer Dominion logistics will collapse within 11 days. One officer reported calmly. Slave revolts are spreading faster than expected. Expected? Lyra asked before stopping herself. Several commanders turned toward her. Sarek answered without emotion. Every authoritarian empire depends on fear to maintain cohesion. Remove the illusion of invincibility and internal collapse accelerates naturally. You predicted all of this. We predicted several possible behavioral outcomes. Lyra stared at the projection, silently. How long has the Lantern Protocol existed? No one answered immediately. Then Sarek stepped closer to the stars hovering above the chamber floor. 212 years. The number hit Lyra harder than she expected. Humanity had prepared for this before she was born, before Elias Ward became an ambassador, before half the current assembly governments even existed. Why? She whispered. For the first time, something human flickered behind Sarek's cold composure. Because we met the galaxy long before the galaxy met us. The chamber darkened. A classified archive unfolded across projection space. Ancient human exploration footage appeared from humanity's earliest interstellar era. Primitive ships drifted silently beyond uncharted systems, while hidden probes observed alien civilizations from a distance. Young human governments had watched empires enslave weaker species, bombard civilian worlds, and erase entire cultures over territorial disputes. The footage changed again. Human leaders arguing in emergency councils, military simulations, predictions, probability trees branching endlessly across holographic displays. Then came the conclusion humanity reached centuries ago. If the galaxy ever viewed humans as a strategic threat before humanity was strong enough to survive united opposition, extinction would follow. So humanity chose invisibility, not literal invisibility, political invisibility. They became useful instead of dominant, cooperative instead of intimidating. Humans entered every system they could without triggering fear. They repaired economies, managed trade routes, built infrastructure, solved diplomatic disputes, smiled constantly, all while quietly building contingency plans for the day peace failed. Lyra felt cold. You turned yourselves into prey. No, Sarek corrected softly. We turned ourselves into something predators would ignore. Before Lyra could respond, alarms erupted through the chamber. Every projection shifted instantly toward Sol, toward Earth. A military officer's voice echoed sharply across the room. Multiple Varkan strike groups detected entering outer solar perimeter. The room froze. Long-range tactical feeds appeared above them, showing hundreds of enemy warships emerging from hyperspace beyond Neptune. Their formation spread rapidly into assault vectors aimed directly at Earth and Luna. The Varkan had finally stopped retreating. Supreme Marshal Kayla himself appeared across intercepted military channels moments later. His massive armored form stood upon the bridge of the Dominion's wrath, fury burning behind his reptilian eyes. You hide behind shadows and sabotage, he snarled across the transmission. But every species bleeds when its home burns. The feed ended. Silence followed. Then Lyra noticed something strange. None of the human commanders looked worried. Not one. Admiral Sarek simply watched the tactical projections quietly while enemy fleets accelerated deeper into the solar system. Thousands of Varkan weapon signatures lit the displays crimson. The force moving toward Earth was massive enough to annihilate civilizations. Still no fear, no urgency, no panic, only anticipation. Then one of the officers near Sarek finally spoke. Permission to wake the bastions. Sarek nodded once. Granted. At first, nothing happened. Then deep beneath the oceans of Europa, something enormous opened its eyes. The Varkan fleet crossed the orbit of Jupiter, expecting resistance. Instead, they found silence. No defensive formations waited for them near Mars. No human warships challenged their advance through the outer system. Long-range scans showed civilian traffic gone completely dark, while Earth itself floated quietly in the distance like an exposed heart waiting for the knife. Supreme Marshal Killer stood at the center of the Dominion's Wrath Bridge, staring toward the pale blue sphere on the tactical display, with growing suspicion tightening beneath his rage. It was too easy. Even now, after everything humanity had revealed, part of him still wanted to believe humans relied on deception because they lacked true military strength. Ambushes, sabotage, psychological warfare, the tactics of weaker predators surviving through cunning rather than dominance. But something about Sol felt wrong. The silence did not resemble fear. It resembled patience. Advance all strike groups, Kaler ordered coldly. Target Earth orbital sectors first. Burn their shipyards before the hidden fleets arrive. Thousands of Varkan vessels accelerated inward. Then Saturn disappeared. Not literally. For one impossible second, the gas giant simply vanished from sensor networks across the entire fleet. Confusion erupted instantly across Varkan communications. Tactical systems glitched violently, while gravitational alarms screamed throughout the armada. Navigation computers lost reference points. Hyperspace stabilizers fluctuated wildly as something enormous awakened beneath the structure of local space itself. Then Saturn returned. But the rings were moving. Kaler stared in disbelief as millions of icy fragments separating Saturn's orbit suddenly shifted formation with mechanical precision. Entire sections of the planetary rings unfolded outward like gigantic metallic wings hidden beneath frozen debris for centuries. Massive structures emerged from within the ice fields, Ancient weapon platforms larger than cities, their surfaces covered in black armor plating invisible against the darkness of space. One Varkan officer whispered the thought spreading across every bridge simultaneously. Those are not stations. No, they were cannons. The first bastion fired before anyone could react. A beam of white light erupted across the void with enough force to split darkness itself. It crossed nearly 1,000,000 kilometers in less than a heartbeat and struck the lead Varkan dreadnought directly through its core. There was no explosion, no dramatic collapse. The ship simply ceased to exist. The space where it had been glowed briefly with molten particles before fading into emptiness. Then the rest of Saturn's rings ignited. Hundreds of hidden weapons awakened simultaneously from beneath the frozen debris fields. Gigantic magnetic accelerators hurled tungsten, masses the size of mountains, across interplanetary space. Directed energy lances sliced through enemy formations with horrifying precision. Entire Varkan squadrons vanished before they even understood they were under attack. The solar system itself had become a fortress, and this was only the outer perimeter. Deep beneath Luna's command chambers, Lyra Vale watched the battle unfold with numb disbelief, while human tactical officers calmly coordinated defensive operations around her. Massive holographic projections tracked enemy fleet collapses in real time. Varkan formations broke apart instantly under the scale of firepower emerging from hidden installations throughout Sol. Europa's oceans opened next. Colossal structures rose from beneath the frozen moon's surface like ancient sea monsters awakening after centuries of sleep. Human warships emerged from submerged dockyards kilometers beneath the ice, their black hulls carrying no visible insignias. Thousands of vessels powered upward simultaneously, while antimatter drives illuminated Jupiter's storms in ghostly blue light. Not one of those ships existed in assembly military databases. Not one. How many? Lyra whispered. An officer beside her answered without looking away from the battle. Enough. That terrified her more than any number could have. The Varkan armada attempted immediate retreat once the scale of humanity's defenses became undeniable, but it was already too late. Human interdiction systems activated across the outer system, destabilizing hyperspace corridors and trapping enemy vessels inside Sol like prey inside a seal cage. Kaler roared commands across his bridge, while Varkan ships died around him faster than tactical systems could update. How did we miss this? One officer shouted desperately. How could anyone hide structures this large? Kaler had no answer, because the truth was becoming impossible to deny. Humanity had not built these defenses recently. They had been here all along, buried beneath moons, hidden inside asteroid fields, concealed beneath oceans and planetary crusts. For centuries, the realization struck harder than the weapons themselves. Every smiling diplomat, every trade negotiation, every peaceful agreement humanity ever signed had existed alongside this unimaginable military machine sleeping quietly beneath the surface, not because humans desired conquest, because they expected betrayal eventually. And they had been right. Then Earth finally spoke. A transmission spread simultaneously across every battlefield frequency inside Sol. Human encryption systems forced themselves through Varkan communication networks with overwhelming authority until even enemy bridges fell silent to hear the message. Admiral Naomi Sarek appeared across every screen. Behind her stood the vast command chamber buried beneath Luna, illuminated by tactical projections showing destruction unfolding across the solar system. This is Admiral Sarek of the United Human Systems, she said calmly, to the forces of the Varkan Dominion. Your invasion has failed. Your fleets are surrounded. Further resistance will result in total military neutralization. Kaler snarled at the screen. You hide weapons behind lies and call yourselves honorable? Sarek's expression never changed. No, we survived. The answer silenced the battlefield more effectively than shouting ever could. She continued. For 300 years, humanity observed a galaxy where strength justified cruelty and weakness invited extermination. We concluded early that peace alone could not guarantee survival, so we built the Lantern Protocol. Images unfolded behind her, hidden shipyards drifting between dead stars, dark sector manufacturing worlds concealed inside nebulae, autonomous fleets sleeping beneath frozen oceans. ancient military networks woven invisibly through human civilization itself. "We did not build these systems for conquest," Sarek said quietly. "We built them because history taught us a simple truth. Sooner or later, someone always tests whether peaceful people are capable of defending themselves." Her eyes hardened. "Ambassador Elias Ward died because your empire believed restraint meant weakness." Then came the final revelation. The Lantern Protocol was never a revenge plan. The tactical projections shifted. New targets appeared across Varkan territory. Every military command center, every weapons depot, every slave processing facility, every strategic shipyard, all mapped, all vulnerable, all already infiltrated. It was containment, Sarek finished. And at that exact moment, hidden human operatives activated inside the Varkan capital itself. The capital world of Varkan Prime had never known fear. For 6 centuries, the Dominion's throne world stood untouched behind layers of military power so immense that most species considered attacking it suicidal. Orbiting defense arrays surrounded the planet in concentric rings of firepower. Fortress moons guarded every approach corridor. Tens of millions of soldiers occupied the surface beneath monuments, celebrating conquest and domination. The Varkan believed themselves untouchable. Then their sky went dark. At first, citizens thought it was some kind of atmospheric malfunction. Towering cities vanished beneath enormous shadows crossing above the clouds, while emergency sirens erupted across the planetary capital. Millions looked upward expecting to see invading fleets descending through orbit. Instead, they saw something far worse. Human ships were already there. Thousands of black vessels hung silently above the world, as if they had materialized from nowhere. No hyperspace signatures had been detected. No defensive perimeter reported breaches. One moment the sky was clear. The next, humanity-controlled orbit. Panic detonated instantly across military command networks. Defense stations attempted targeting locks, only to discover their systems already compromised. Missile batteries rotated harmlessly away from human formations. Orbital cannons shut down one after another, while encrypted human override codes flooded Dominion infrastructure faster than engineers could respond. Someone inside Varkan Prime had betrayed them. No, something far more terrifying. Humanity had been inside their systems for years. Deep beneath the capital city, Supreme Marshal killers stormed through the Dominion War citadel surrounded by armed guards while emergency lights painted the corridors blood red. Reports screamed through every tactical display simultaneously. Outer fleet destroyed. Slave sectors revolting. Military governors surrendering. Communications compromised. Entire defense grids offline. The Dominion was collapsing so quickly it no longer resembled war. It resembled controlled demolition. Kaler slammed both fists against the command table hard enough to crack reinforced alloy. "Find me their main fleet." A trembling officer looked up from his console with visible terror. "Marshal, this is their main fleet." The words hit the room like a funeral bell, because everyone present finally understood the scale of humanity's deception. The small patrol vessels, the civilian freighters, the diplomatic escorts. Those had never been military assets. They had been camouflage. The real human war machine had existed somewhere beyond civilization's sightline for centuries, growing silently in darkness while the galaxy mocked humanity as weak. And now it had arrived all at once. Meanwhile, across liberated Varkan territories, another transformation was unfolding. Slave populations once terrified of even whispering rebellion suddenly rose against their occupiers with explosive fury. Human strike teams coordinated uprisings across dozens of systems simultaneously, disabling military command structures moments before oppressed populations seized local control. The galaxy watched in disbelief as human soldiers entered prison worlds not as conquerors, but as liberators. On Keltar Station, millions of enslaved civilians expected orbital bombardment once human fleets arrived overhead. Instead, human marines descended directly into active combat zones to evacuate non-combatants while fighting Varkan security forces street by street. The footage spread everywhere. Humans carrying wounded alien children through burning cities. Human medics treating enemy civilians alongside freed prisoners. Human soldiers shielding refugees with their own bodies while precision strikes destroyed military positions overhead. For For the first time in modern galactic history, a major civilization was waging war without targeting civilian populations. That frightened some assembly leaders more than genocide would have, because it suggested humanity possessed not only overwhelming military superiority, but discipline strong enough to control it. And disciplined power was far more dangerous than chaos. Inside Luna Command, Lyra Vale watched the liberation feeds with conflicting emotions twisting inside her chest. Pride, horror, awe, fear. Humanity was becoming exactly what Elias Ward had hoped the galaxy could one day become. Yet beneath the victories, something darker was beginning to move. She saw it first in the casualty projections. Human losses were rising sharply near the core assault zones surrounding Varkan Prime. Not because the Dominion was winning, but because certain human fleets were ignoring standard engagement protocols entirely. Tactical reports showed aggressive commanders pushing bombardment authorizations closer and closer to civilian sectors. Then she found the classified transmissions. Unauthorized, encrypted, human, a Black Ops strike group designated Eclipse Squadron had disappeared from Central Command tracking 6 hours earlier. Their fleet included prohibited weapons platforms humanity officially denied existing. Planet killer systems. Lyra's blood went cold as she scanned the intercepted messages. No surrender. No mercy. Burn the throne world. The officers in the transmission spoke with raw fury barely restrained beneath military discipline. Elias Ward's murder had become more than political catalyst for many humans. It had become proof that restraint itself endangered humanity. And now some wanted the war ended permanently, by erasing the Dominion completely. Lyra moved through Luna Command faster than security teams could question her, carrying the stolen data directly toward Admiral Sarek's strategy chamber. Around her, human personnel coordinated the largest military campaign in recorded history with chilling efficiency. No panic, no celebration, just relentless focus. That calm frightened her now, because she realized something most of the galaxy still did not. Humanity's greatest strength was not its fleets. It was control. And if that control finally broke, she reached the command chamber just as alarms erupted throughout the facility. Every tactical display shifted instantly toward Varkan Prime. One of the officers looked up sharply. "Admiral, we just lost contact with Eclipse Squadron." Another voice followed immediately after. "Wait, no." The officer's face drained of color. "They've entered low planetary orbit." Sarek turned slowly toward the tactical projection, hovering above the chamber. The display zoomed inward. Beneath the clouds of Varkan Prime, billions of civilians still occupied the surface, while Dominion military forces collapsed system by system around them. And descending through the atmosphere, directly toward the capital skyline, came 6 black human warships carrying enough firepower to crack continents apart. Then the transmission arrived. Not from the Dominion, from Eclipse Squadron itself. A human commander appeared on screen wearing dark combat armor with Elias Ward's blood-red diplomatic insignia painted across his chest. His expression carried the cold fury of someone who had already crossed every moral line in his mind. "We are ending this tonight," he said. Then the feed cut, and somewhere beneath the burning skies of Varkan Prime, ancient weapons humanity swore would never be used began powering online. The first planetary alarm sounded across Varkan Prime at exactly 3:17 local time. By 3:19, the entire world was screaming. Billions of civilians flooded evacuation routes beneath burning skies, while Dominion command networks collapsed into chaos overhead. Human fleets controlled orbit completely now. Every defense platform surrounding the throne world had either surrendered or gone dark. Entire sections of the atmosphere glowed crimson, where orbital battles still raged beyond the clouds. And descending through the fire came Eclipse Squadron. The 6 black warships pierced the atmosphere like falling blades, their hulls illuminated by storms of plasma, while shock waves rolled across the capital continents beneath them. Unlike the rest of humanity's fleet, these vessels carried no diplomatic markings, no assembly insignias, no symbols of peace. Only the lantern, burned into black steel like a warning from ancient history. Inside Luna Command, Lyra Vale stood at the center of command chamber, unraveling faster than anyone could contain it. Officers shouted over one another while emergency override attempts failed across tactical networks. Eclipse Squadron had severed itself completely from centralized command authority, which meant the unthinkable had happened. Humanity was fracturing in the middle of victory. They bypassed fleet authorization. One operator reported desperately, "Planetary strike systems are arming." Another voice followed immediately, "We're detecting singularity core activation." The room froze. Even hardened military veterans turned pale at those words. Singularity weapons were forbidden, not politically forbidden, morally forbidden. The last time humanity used one had been during the extinction wars before first contact, when entire star systems vanished beneath gravitational collapse. The weapons were considered so catastrophic that every surviving human government had sworn never to construct them again. Apparently, someone had lied. Admiral Sarek stared at the tactical projections in absolute silence, while the truth settled over the chamber like ash. Eclipse Squadron was not threatening bombardment. They were preparing erasure. Lyra stepped towards Sarek sharply. "You have to stop them." Sarek's expression remained unreadable. "We are trying." "No," Lyra snapped. "Not strategically. Personally." That finally made Sarek look at her. "You know why Elias created the diplomatic corps in the first place?" Lyra demanded, emotion breaking through her composure for the first time. "Because he believed humanity's real test would never be whether we could defeat monsters." Her voice shook. "It would be whether becoming strong enough to stop them eventually turned us into one." The words struck harder than any alarm in the chamber. Around them, officers continued fighting for control of collapsing command systems, while tactical displays showed Eclipse Squadron descending lower toward the Varkan capital. Human evacuation broadcasts still filled civilian channels across the planet, urging non-combatants towards safe corridors before the strike began. But there was not enough time, not for billions. Meanwhile, beneath the throne city of Arkarath, Supreme Marshal Kaler stood inside the collapsing Dominion citadel, staring upward through shattered observation towers at the burning heavens above his world. Everything was gone. His fleets, his empire, his certainty. For the first time in his life, Kaler understood what true helplessness felt like. Human warships filled the skies and numbers beyond. Comprehension, while liberated slave armies overran military sectors across the planet below. Entire Dominion legions surrendered without orders. Others fled. Some simply abandoned their weapons and waited for death. The Varkan Empire was already dead. Only the corpse remained. Then one of Kaler's surviving officers entered the chamber, scales trembling visibly. "Marshal, human channels are broadcasting evacuation orders." Kaler frowned. "Evacuation?" "Yes, sir." Confusion spread through the ruined command center. Human fleets had already won. There was no tactical reason for civilian evacuation now unless realization hit Kaler like physical force. They're going to destroy the planet. The officer lowered his gaze silently. For several long seconds, the mighty conqueror of the Dominion simply stood there beneath the collapsing ceiling while distant impacts shook the city around him. Then, unexpectedly, Kaler laughed. Not with arrogance, not with rage, with bitter understanding. "All this time," he murmured, "we thought humans feared war because they were weak." Outside, another human warship descended through clouds. "We never imagined they feared it because they knew exactly what they were capable of." High above the planet, aboard the flagship Nightfall, Commander Adrian Vale watched Singularity Core readings climb steadily toward critical activation. His jaw remained tight with fury as tactical projections illuminated the bridge around him. Below, the species responsible for Elias Ward's death still occupied the capital. Millions of Dominion loyalists remained armed. Even now, Varkan extremists executed civilians attempting to flee evacuation zones. The war would never truly end while the Dominion survived. Adrian believed that completely. Around him, Eclipse Squadron officers waited silently for final authorization. None questioned the order anymore. They had all seen too much. Slave worlds, torture camps, cities turned into graveyards. Peace had failed. Mercy had failed. Now only fear remained. A communications officer turned suddenly toward Adrian. "Sir, incoming priority transmission." "Ignore it." The officer hesitated. "It's from Admiral Sarek." "Denied." Another pause. "Sir, there's a second authorization tag attached." Adrian finally looked up. His expression changed instantly, because the second tag belonged to Elias Ward, Dead Man Authority. A recording activated across the bridge. Elias appeared on screen wearing his old diplomatic uniform, his tired eyes carrying the same calm warmth Adrian remembered from childhood. The message had clearly been recorded long before the Summit assassination. "If you're seeing this," Elias said quietly, "then I was right." Silence consumed the bridge. "I know what some of you will want after I'm gone. I know because I wanted it too once." Elias smiled sadly. "But revenge feels righteous right until the moment it becomes identity." Adrian's fists clenched. Below the ship, singularity systems continued charging. "If humanity ever reaches a point where fear becomes our primary language," Elias continued, "then eventually we will create a galaxy that obeys us without ever trusting us." The recording flickered briefly. "And if that happens, then everything we survive to protect stops meaning anything." Across the bridge, hardened soldiers stood motionless while the dead diplomat's voice filled the silence between stars. Then alarms exploded violently throughout the nightfall. A tactical officer shouted in disbelief, "Sir, multiple human fleets just entered orbit." The projection screens shifted instantly. Hundreds of human warships surrounded Eclipse Squadron from every direction, weapons armed. Target locks confirmed. At the center of the formation appeared Admiral Naomi Sarek's flagship. Then her voice echoed across every ship in orbit around Varkin Prime. "This is Admiral Sarek to Eclipse Squadron." A long silence followed. Then came the order that would decide what humanity became. "Stand down." For several endless seconds, nobody moved. The skies above Varkin Prime burned with the light of orbiting fleets, while billions waited below, without understanding that the future of the galaxy now balanced on a single human decision. Across every military channel, every civilian network, every surviving assembly relay, humanity watched itself standing at the edge of becoming something irreversible. On the bridge of the Nightfall, Commander Adrian Vale stared silently at the tactical projection surrounding Eclipse Squadron. Hundreds of human warships held targeting locks against his fleet. Not enemy ships. Human ships. Humanity had reached the point Elias Ward feared most. The moment where victory itself threatened to become corruption. "Sir," one officer whispered carefully, "the Singularity cores are fully armed." Adrian did not answer. Beyond the bridge glass, Varkin Prime turned slowly beneath them. Fires stretched across continents scarred by centuries of Dominion rule. Slave camps still smoldered. Military citadels collapsed one after another beneath coordinated human strikes. Millions were already dead because the Varkin believed power granted permission to brutalize weaker civilizations. Part of Adrian still wanted to end it permanently. One strike. One moment. No more empires. No more future tyrants. The temptation terrified him because it sounded reasonable. Then Elias Ward's final words echoed through his memory again. "Revenge feels righteous right until the moment it becomes identity." Adrian closed his eyes, and finally understood why humanity hid its strength for so long. Not from fear of alien civilizations, from fear of itself. Slowly, he looked toward the weapons officer. "Deactivate singularity systems." Nobody on the bridge moved at first. Several officers stared at him in disbelief. Others looked almost relieved. Years of grief and fury battled visibly across hardened faces, while alarms continued pulsing crimson through the ship. Then, one by one, Eclipse Squadron's weapon signatures disappeared from tactical displays across orbit. Inside Luna Command, an entire chamber of human officers released breath they did not realize they had been holding. Lyra Vale felt her knees weaken slightly as Singularity readings finally collapsed toward zero. Around her, exhausted commanders lowered their heads in silence while Admiral Sarek continued watching the battlefield without visible emotion. But Lyra noticed it. A tiny shift in Sarek's posture. Relief, not because humanity had won, because humanity had stopped itself. Far below, Supreme Marshal Kaler stood atop the ruined balcony of the Dominion Citadel as evacuation craft filled the skies around the collapsing capital. Human warships still dominated orbit completely. The Varkan Empire remained shattered beyond recovery, yet the world still existed. Kaler stared upward in disbelief as human fleets repositioned away from planetary bombardment formations. "They spared us," one surviving officer whispered behind him. Kaler's expression darkened. "No," he said quietly. "They spared themselves." Hours later, the formal surrender transmission spread across every surviving network in the galaxy. Supreme Marshal Kaler, conqueror of 1,000 worlds, knelt before humanity on live interstellar broadcast, while Dominion fleets powered down their weapons system by system. The image traveled farther and faster than any military victory in recorded history, not because the Varkan had lost, because the species they considered weak had demonstrated a kind of power the galaxy barely understood: restraint. The wars ended quickly after that. Without the Dominion's military core, occupied systems revolted openly, while human fleets dismantled remaining war infrastructures with relentless precision. Slave populations were liberated across hundreds of worlds. Former client species abandoned the collapsing empire almost overnight. Entire military sectors surrendered without resistance once they realized humanity did not seek extermination, only accountability. 3 months later, the assembly reconvened inside the rebuilt Hall of Concord. The bloodstains from Elias Ward's death were gone now, replaced by a circular memorial of white stone at the center of the chamber floor. Thousands gathered beneath the great banners of the assembly to witness the first session of a galaxy permanently changed. Human soldiers stood openly along the chamber walls for the first time in history, not as conquerors, as guardians. Supreme Marshal Kaler appeared in restraints before the Assembly Tribunal beside surviving Dominion officials accused of slavery, genocide, and crimes against civilian populations. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as laws once considered impossible were rewritten before their eyes. Diplomatic immunity no longer protected murder. Civilian extermination became grounds for united intervention. Enslavement of sentient species triggered automatic military response from every signatory world. The old galaxy had tolerated cruelty as political reality. Humanity ended that reality at gunpoint. Yet, even then, they refused the throne everyone expected them to claim. When the Assembly formally offered humanity permanent supreme authority over interstellar security, Admiral Sarek declined publicly. "We are not here to rule the galaxy," she said before the chamber. "We are here to ensure no civilization ever mistakes compassion for helplessness again." Then she stepped aside and invited Lyra Vale to the center podium. The young commander stood silently for several moments beneath the massive chamber lights, while delegates from hundreds of species watched her carefully. Somewhere above them, human fleets still guarded the stars. Humanity possessed enough military superiority now to dominate civilization completely if it chose. That frightened everyone, including humans themselves. Lyra finally looked toward the memorial stone carrying Elias Ward's name. "My mentor believed peace was not the absence of power," she said softly. "He believed peace was power held under control." The chamber remained completely silent. For centuries, humanity hid its strength because we feared becoming what we saw in the galaxy around us. Then Elias died trying to prove cooperation mattered more than force. Her voice tightened slightly, and for a while we almost proved him wrong. Several human officers lowered their eyes. But the measure of civilization is not whether it can destroy its enemies. Lyra looked slowly across the chamber. It is whether it can stop itself after victory becomes easy. No applause followed. No dramatic celebration. Only silence heavy with understanding. Because every species present knew they had witnessed something unprecedented. Humanity had conquered the strongest empire in known space, then voluntarily restrained itself at the height of absolute power. Years later, children across liberated worlds would study the Lantern Protocol in history archives. Some would describe it as the moment humanity became guardians of civilization. Others would call it the day the galaxy learned why peaceful species should never be mistaken for harmless ones. But hidden deep within the unmapped dark between stars, far beyond assembly territory, ancient human fleets still drifted silently through the void, watching, waiting, and ensuring that if another empire ever mistook kindness for weakness again, The lantern would already be lit,